next guest reached out to me last week after we talked about this concept of male relationship emotional labor, and he had a different approach. He saw the value of it in a whole different from a whole different tack. So let me bring in somebody that I think many of you on YouTube are well familiar with. What's up, Uncle D?
What's up, man? How you
doing,
doing, doctor?
I'm good, man. How about yourself?
I'm doing good, doctor. I'm actually doing a simulcast of this on my channel right now, so we can get the maximum exposure, because I think that this is a very important topic, and I'm honored to be here, and it's always, I mean, to be on the stage with you, it's always an honor,
And I still have brothers writing to me about the last 2 times you came up in here. When you were shutting it down, you were telling brothers how they can manage their way out of relationships that are not going well.
Right.
Yeah. And so there was some interesting directives given in that. So people still reach out to me on that. But for those who may not know, and I don't think it's many, introduce yourself. Tell people what you do.
My name is Dennis Spurling. I'm an attorney. I've been licensed to practice law for 20 years. My specialty is complex civil litigation, which includes mass toxic torts. When things blow up, I get involved. That includes chemical plants. In addition to that, I'm one of the interim counsel on the CPAP litigation, which is a big honor. Out of all the thousands of lawyers involved in it, I'm one of 8 lawyers who's helping bring in or rein in the defendants on this Philips, the respirator that they had a recall back in April, and so a lot of people were affected by that. Yep. And so I'm one of the attorneys. I've been flying back and forth from Pennsylvania, working with some great people in federal court on that, and a proud HBCU grad, Southern University Law Center, Grambling State University. And of course, I got my LLM from Tulane. So I got the Ivy League side, I got the HBCU side, state school, private school. I think my most important title is father.
There we go.
And specifically Black father. And I believe that's important because it gives me I got a dog in this hunt.
Right.
It's not that there's nowhere I can go. I can't run from the issues that Black men face. Why? Because my sons will have to grow up and bear that burden if I don't try to do something about it here. So I'm very interested. And so it's interesting how you and I kind of gravitated to each other, because our content it has, I would say, the same objective, but it's you come, from the academy, and I'm a litigator. So I see things from a legal perspective. And also my background is in science. I got my bachelor's degree in biology. I was working towards my master's in biology, and my PhD in environmental molecular toxicology and environmental policy. But I had to come back to practicing law. But science is still my first love. So either way, that's it. But man, I'm Uncle D to the homies, man. Also known as the Blizzard King, man. I'm ushering in the winter. Shout out to everybody, man. If y'all can hear me, hit the #1 button and give a big W for Dr. T. Hasan Johnson, because we're going in for the win. How about that?
Right. And make sure y'all support, like, share, subscribe, join, donate, do all of that. Support both channels, please. But we had a conversation last week.
Yeah.
I did my show, and I was talking about this idea of male relationship emotional labor and the roles that we play. You had a very different take on it, because it even though the potential for the concept can go a number of different ways, the focus was still dealing kind of with what men do in intimate relationships, maybe even the roles we play as sons, even as children, the emotional labor we perform for women, whether they're family members, whether they're lovers, wives, etc. But you had a different take on it. Tell us a little bit about what you were concerned with.
All right. So early last year, when I first arrived on the YouTube scene, I wanted to talk about the social contract. And when I say the social contract, that's the contract that exists between men and women to keep the society going. Of course, the dominant society has a social contract. And then Black people in the subculture, African-American subculture, we have our own social contract. Now, of course, it mimics the dominant society. But here's the thing: the old social contract that existed between Black folks, the mating selection, there's a social contract. Who do you pick and choose? There was one thing before feminism, and now it's something else. As far as general race loyalty, there was one thing. There were certain terms that existed before segregation ended, and now there's something different. The roles that African American men and women played in the household. There were traditional roles that we kind of used to have, which mimicked the dominant society, but now they're different. And in addition to that, what we have to do now is examine how has the contract changed. Now, whether you want to go biblical or whether you want to go practical, men are expected to provide certain things on the interpersonal level. And typically we say what? Provision and protection, right? We say that. Somebody said my mic is low, so I'm gonna put the mic a little bit closer. Y'all see I updated. I got that high definition TV. All you brothers in the manosphere, since I spent the $400 for this, help me get this back, man. But is that better? Can you guys hear my sound better?
You're good.
You guys can hear me better. Hit the number 1 button if you can hear me, guys. I hope you can hear me. Anyway, so now let's look at the interpersonal relationship between men and women. What are men expected to provide in a relationship?
Yeah,
protection and provision, right?
Right.
Now, I was originally looking at it as though provision was, food and sustenance. After our conversation, you helped me or actually you referred to as protection. The emotional support that men supply is actually a protection.
Yeah.
So I mean that that really set a light off. It put a light off in my head. Wow, but it still all fits in. But see, this is a component that is often overlooked in the relationship, but it is a deal breaker when it comes to divorce.
Absolutely.
Think about that.
Absolutely.
I mean, my God. Oh, he wasn't there for me emotionally. He's cold. What do they say? This is a deal, but you got this guy who looks great on paper. He makes money. He takes care of his family. He's a provider. He's a protector. And because she says he's emotionally cold, this is grounds for divorce. Are you kidding me?
Right.
How could we have overlooked this?
And that's not even how men are trained. We're not trained to do that. There was a shift, and I'll be brief with this, but we all saw shit. If anybody saw Fences, right? If you saw Fences with Denzel, or if you saw it on stage, that character, Troy, represented masculinity before the 1970s. Right. There was no expectation that he'd be there for you emotionally and that he do. No, the expectations placed on Black men were protect and provide. That's why the classical scene everybody trips out on is when he tells his son, I don't have to like you. Right. My responsibility is to take care of you and prepare you for the world. After the 1980s, you get this whole other narrative about men being emotionally present, being willing to cry, X, Y, and Z, and all these different things. But what nobody wants to talk about is that women subtly punish men who are emotionally expressive. Right. Even to this day, I've been hearing it from the 80s to now. How her behavior changed the moment she saw you crying. It can be over the death of your mother or your father. It can be something that is, significantly serious. And men will talk about her whole demeanor change. She lost respect. And that was the beginning of the end of the relationship. But I didn't want to interrupt. But I just wanted to add that. No. That definitely lays the context. And so, where I'm going with it. So now I have to look at that in the context of what does this look like on a macro level? And when I say macro, I mean, okay, we see how interpersonal relationships go as far as man and woman, him and her, them in the same room, two individuals. But what about the fact that now you got a social contract between a group of people, men and women, that's changed? Okay, so before, men were expected to provide certain things. As a group, you see a Black woman getting beat up, you're supposed to jump in. That's part of the social contract on a macro level. Yes. You see a Black woman struggling with kids, you're supposed to help out.
You're supposed to console your sisters, blah, 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 this, that, and the other. Now, before, there was what? Submission and cooperation. But so the social contract has changed, and our lovely ladies, as I like to call them, and I mean lovely ladies, I don't mean anything else. I mean lovely ladies, right? I'm putting good vibes out there, you know. And so because the social contract has changed and they're no longer obligated to do anything for it, they don't even have to smile at us if they don't want to.
It's offensive.
And so what does that mean?
Yeah.
That means that what are the terms? All our lovely ladies are supposed to give us in exchange for our services, which includes that aspect, that protectionist aspect, that is sex and validation. That's it. That we're supposed to get as a group. But they don't have to do that. That's on the individual level.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But what do they have to give us as a group? Nothing. And so now you have black men saying, well, the terms have changed. We don't have to give you group protection, which we don't have to fight and die fighting white supremacy racism. As far as provision, we are expected to provide for them and the children that they fathered with other men, but we don't have to do that now. And on the emotional level, right, which is also known as the deal breaker, we don't have to do anything for them. And so what's happening now? Look what the women are doing now that the men are withdrawing that emotional support that we used to give them. I mean, that's where I'm going with it. Yeah.
No, absolutely. I call it a one-way traditionalism, right? Where in one vein, just like we can go back to the 50s, the 40s, the 30s, you're still supposed to protect and provide not just your woman or daughter, but anyone you come into contact with. She could have a busted tire at the side of the freeway. It's expected that you stop and do these things. But in a relationship, it's this kind of traditional idea where you do this. But women, as you pointed out, after the introduction of feminism, they don't have to do anything. They can have your child or not. They can work full-time, part-time, not at all. They're never called, what is it we call men that refuse to work? Bums or there's a couple of new terms that slip my mind right now. They don't have any of that. They can choose any role they want or none at all. And that's proper exchange for the the stable social expectation that men continue to play the same roles we've been playing for generations, while having added the new dimensions of emotional presence and so on and so forth. The question then becomes, as you pointed out, if men start to respond to the environment by saying this one-way traditionalism does not benefit us, we don't get anything out of it, and I'm still playing the same role that her grandmother enjoyed. Well, men start to say, well, what are some new contracts I can entertain? What are some new engagements that I can look into? Because this is not feeding me. All I'm doing is pouring out. Yeah.
Now, one thing, what happens, and I don't think we've given an adequate explanation for what the emotional load is. And you gave a masterful explanation. You said that the emotional load was what? It's when you're in the movie theater with your wife, and this part that reminds her of something bad that happened to her as a child, or you talk through that part so she won't see it or she won't listen to it.
Yeah, I was actually explaining how we had lost, all in all, we lost 3 pregnancies, and one of which she had to deliver. So think about a woman who's 6 months along. And you've had children, so even when the baby's in the womb, you got dreams, you got thoughts, you're wondering, 6 months, 6.5 months into it, the baby dies and she has to deliver it, right? So we went through that, 3 separate times. And so what ended up happening is she became it was understandable, but she became traumatized when she would see other women with children. So I had to develop this spider sense. If we were taking a walk and I saw a woman with a baby carriage, I'd have to turn us another way before she saw the woman. Otherwise, she might spend a couple days in bed depressed. You know what I mean? If we're watching a TV show or a movie and I see it going that way, I either change it or turn it off or distract her for a scene. And it got to be such that, it became, and I used this example when I talked about it, it became like a dance that I would lead. And she would trust me to lead it because she didn't want to have to rebuild herself from scratch every time she had a breakdown. So if I distracted her in the middle of the movie, she wouldn't be like, well, why are you asking now? She got to the point where she would go with the distraction because she trusted that I was pulling her from something that she couldn't handle. But I never thought of that as labor. It was just something I did because the situation was needed. And when I started to look at how men in society function, I realized that not only are men doing this in individual relationships, we're doing this on a larger path. I mean, when you talk about when you talk about welfare, when you talk about, these are various types of policy-based emotional labor. Yes, there is a material need addressed, but it's also a feeling of stability. And I think in our community, what that has spawned is a disdain for Black men, a misandry, because they don't see the need for it.
Doc, let me give them a prime example of Black men holding the emotional load on a group level. Okay. So Black American women have a weight problem. I think we have an obesity problem in the Black. I think we all can agree on that. But instead of Black men ignoring, instead of Black men stating that, they will ignore those facts to spare the effect that the truth will have on the feelings of Black American women. So we'll say, oh, it's okay, baby, you fine. You're 180 pounds, you 5'3", you're fine. We're bearing that emotional load because we're trying to spare her feelings. That's one example. Or what you have, and Black women are so used to Black men holding that load that when you do tell them about it, what will they say? They'll say, "Oh, you're hateful. You hate Black American women." They'll try to shame you. They'll do that. They'll try to do anything they can to make you stop that because they're not used to men in the Black community not sharing that emotional load.
Right.
And see, here's the thing, and if you don't mind me mentioning, Kevin Samuels is masterful at letting these women realize, I'm not going to carry your emotional load. You're average, you are overweight, you have too many children for a man that will really that you want you. And so that's what he's doing. And we enjoy watching the carnage, especially Black men, because that's something that we want to do. We want to not be able, we don't want to carry that emotional load anymore, especially since the contract has been breached. And we're talking macro level. That's a good, maybe you have another example you can use.
Well, no, I would just say this is how cold the game is. It's when you watch Kevin or other brothers on here that are doing that, it's not just that we're blown away and we're lit up at the fact that he's not carrying their emotional load. It's that we didn't realize that we've been carrying it. When you've been carrying something so long, you forget you're even holding it. And at the same time, we've been bred carry it without being credited for having done so, for doing so. So whether you're a little boy holding performing emotional labor for mothers, you know what I mean, or aunts or whatever, or whether you're a grown man doing it. And here's the thing, I talk about the ways in which we have we have family structure in the Black community where the households are primarily female run, but they're connected. So grandmother's house, mother's house, aunt's house, cousin's house, daughter's house. They're damn near like spheres, but they're female led households in connection with one another. And in many instances, they will even share male resources, right? It can include sex, but it can be anything from repair work to sitting there and listening to them download. And women will even share their men with others as some type of resource. We have all of that going on. And for Black men, we've been socialized to do this for so long, we don't think anything of it. We don't think of it as a value. We don't think of it as a skill. We're not credited for doing it well, but we are punished if we don't do it well. And yet, at the same time, we're a resource that she can share. So how many times as fellas have you heard, well, my girlfriend needs you to go fix such and such in her house or her car or do whatever, or take her son or daughter to an event. You know what I mean? You're actually used as a form of resource that she can barter with her network, right? And this is the framework we're kind of talking about when we see how these families are structured and the way we're socialized. We're already doing emotional labor but we're not told that we are, and we're damn sure not told that it's valuable, even though I would argue it's probably more valuable than any other form of provisioning we have.
I agree. They don't need anything else from us, Doc. Look, they can take care of themselves. They don't need our money. They don't need our protection. They can call 911. All that they can, the only thing that they can't get from these other groups of men on a macro level is for them to carry that emotional load. And you have a better term. I want to use your phraseology because it's distinct for our community. And I want to make sure that the audience has that particular phrase that you use. And can you give it to us, please?
Oh, let me put it up. Yeah. Shout out to Ishmael. Appreciate that support. You talking about this one here?
That is it.
Male relationship, emotional labor. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Male relationship, emotional labor. So this is the term that I want you all to use because it's unique to the Black American community. Okay. It takes into account what we deal with in this particular society, in this particular subsect of society, and you should keep that in mind. See, here's the thing. Black women in social settings are so used to Black men ignoring facts and reality to spare them the effect that the truth will have on their feelings, or that when you don't do it, they holler hate, chauvinism, sexism. Right. When you talk about things like, and here we go, I'm gonna give it to you. Their insecurities. When you bring up the meat, you bring up the weight, when you bring up the children, and you mentioned something earlier. Not only are they expected to share, they expect you as a man to bear. They share men in the fact that this man had the children, but that man's going to help me bear the burden for these children. So in that regard, they use you as a tool. They use you as a resource. But that's one of those things that falls under protection and provision. But emotional labor, my God, I don't think it's been touched, Doc. I don't think that we fully stretched the limits of the effect that's had. I want to bring up this. What you will find is that when some men begin to shed or demonstrate their unwillingness to share that emotional load, you have people who the brothers colloquially refer to as simps. There's some guys online, I won't mention them, but we'll call Steve Harvey. He's a simp. And what these men do is they begin to shame other men who refuse to carry the emotional load back in place. The women run to these types in an attempt to get some countervailing messaging. And the truth is, in my opinion, women don't really respect those men. They don't even really see them as masculine. They actually want a masculine man who they respect to speak to them in a feminine and an emotional form. What are your thoughts on that?
I completely agree. Shout out to Dr. CD too. I completely agree. I mean, I think it's definitely something that I think about it in terms of a restaurant. You ever walk in and see those signs that say we reserve the right to refuse service to anyone?
Yeah.
I want Black men to get to that point because I think the way we've been socialized, we provide it off the jump. We provide it so fast we don't even process it. It's almost like getting a paycheck and a bill comes in and you just pay it. Right? You just pay it, even if you can't afford it. You ain't budgeted yet. You haven't done none of that. You don't even appreciate what you've earned. You just pay it. And I want men to actually step back and say, well, do I want to pay that bill?
Right.
Do I want to provide this type of labor? And I've been in situations where I've decided to withdraw it. I can walk away entirely, or I can engage in a relation of sorts with someone and just decide not to provide it. And you're so right when you say it's processed as hatred. It's processed as an attack. When you haven't attacked, you haven't called anybody out their name, you haven't accused them of anything. You just withdrew an emotional service that you decided not to give. And how dare you?
Yeah, I don't think they recognize that though, Doctor. I don't think they recognize that when we hold stuff, basically we're holding stuff in that we otherwise could say that we would want to let off. We're protecting you from having a bad day, if you will. The same thing you were doing with your wife, you know, when that part of the movie came on. And I don't think women in general appreciate it. And I don't think Black women as a whole appreciate the burden that Black men absorb on their behalf. The crap we take from them, the crap we take from the world, but specifically what they're throwing at us. For the past 60 years, if you look at your TV shows, the Oprah generation, the Color Purple generation, all these ladies, they've been dumping on us and we haven't said anything. Right. And so now over the past 10 years, because of the rise of social media, we've been able to express the fact that we're not willing to accept that emotional load anymore, and they don't like it. No. They don't like it at all.
Well, and I think it also, I mean, because we can. I was talking earlier about the sexual role that has been attached to Black men, right? Sexual expectation. You got women from all over the world that that know what Black men are associated with sexually, right? And expect us to provide those services because that's been the stereotype going back to the Mandingo. This idea of that, and we've learned to perform it in many respects. Right, so much so that we often forego our own needs to perform it. But one of the interesting things that also happens with this is that you have different groups of women that can appreciate what Black men do without thinking, because others are. Now, I'm not saying performing this type of emotional labor is necessarily a good thing.
Yeah,
I'm not saying it's bad or good, but I am saying it's ignored. And there are other groups that, from different places around the world, South America, Caribbean, the continent, there are different places, but these women actually can look at what Black men here do and identify the value of it in a way that we're not trained to. We're actually not trained to. I have a good brother, for example, full professor, one of the youngest full professors I've ever met. I think he became full in his mid-30s. Highly accomplished, intelligent, handsome brother. But because he was so accomplished intellectually, you can imagine how he was talked about from, high school on in regard to women here. Right. He met a woman from the continent. She took one look at him. One look. She said, this man is handsome. He's accomplished. He's intelligent. And nobody is getting with him. If anything, he's ridiculed,
right?
And being intellectually accomplished. He told me she snatched him up so fast he didn't know what was happening. And the intensity, that she had about his value shocked him because he had never been affirmed in that manner. And in terms of the dynamic with women in America, he was, he was what they call an educated lame. She looked at that and said, "Oh, y'all tripping. I got him." And the next thing he knew, he said, I damn near married her on the strength of her attraction to me. But, in that regard, the value of what Black men do here that we don't even think about is seen differently when people are socialized in different contexts. And you could probably speak to that far better than I could.
Well, yeah, and it's interesting, and I actually talked about this in my broadcast last week after watching your work. So I talked earlier about the old social contract. So here's the new social contract, right? And I'm talking specifically about the relationship that exists between Black men and Black women in exchange for sex with a Black woman or being in a relationship with a Black woman, right? This means an individual Black woman, right? You have certain requirements that you owe to the group, right?
Okay.
And in exchange for that, the group will then give you validation and attention. And they will, yeah, good boy, you're doing a good job.
Wow.
So what happens when you decide to date interracially?
Okay.
And you're no longer receiving your sex and attention from a member of the Black American female group, right? So what happens, right? What if you're supposed to give them, if one of their group, and I'm looking at I'm looking at as a scientist, right? If you're not receiving your sex and your validation and your attention from them, right? What do you owe them as a group?
Okay.
Think about that. Like, what do you really? So, and if you begin to think about it, this might be why interracial sex is so looked down upon by Black women. If Black men is not receiving sex and validation and attention from a woman, or if he's receiving sex, validation, and attention from a woman or women of another group or racial group, he has no obligation to then provide protection, provision, or bear the emotional burden of Black American women based on the terms of the newly negotiated social contract. Think about that. Just think about that for a minute, because there's such a vitriolic response when Black men date out, whereas with Black women, because they're not obligated to really give us anything in the new social contract, they can do what they want to do, and you don't have an uproar from Black men, and Black women have nothing to say. So there has to be a better answer in that social enclave. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, here's the thing. The way I look at when I think about feminism, okay, I think about say, for example, I don't know, a knitted sweater.
Okay.
And feminism basically said, well, you know what? When it comes to women and girls, we want to take this strand and we want to just pull it out, and we want to prioritize it. We want to pull it out, and there was no thought to what that would do to the tapestry of the rest of the sweater. In other words, when men stepped back and said, well, if she's redefining herself, I'm standing here by myself holding to, as you said, the old social contract, then this frees me up to raise a whole new set of questions. And with that, you've had, now here's the thing, when you talk about the manosphere just gave names to shit that Black men have been doing for decades.
Right.
I know, I'm serious. I know brothers in their 60s that started dating internationally decades ago, and they actually took the 70s definition of Blackness, which moved from strictly an African American context and moved it to an international one. So you have Black men that will tell you, I still only date Black women, but those Black women may come from, Britain. They may come from Africa. They may come from the Caribbean. They may come from South America. They may come from anywhere. And then you have some that are just completely like, I'll go with whoever extends me the proper amount of respect and care. But the point is, we moved from just an African-American context to a larger one, but it didn't really start, in my assessment, until feminists pulled the string out and said, well, we want something special just for us. And it doesn't work that way. As you said, it's a delicate exchange of resources, energy, social engagements, roles, gender roles at that. And if you're going to pull that tapestry and you're going to say, well, we want to be able to do whatever we want, and we want men to cater to whatever we want to do. If I want to have multiple, men, but you can't see other women, women will come in with this kind of narrative, and then turn around and be surprised when men respond and say, okay, well, if you're going to do that, we're going to have to figure out what we can do. And as Black men have started to explore in these last number of decades, now we're seeing the cost of that, because when you really look at the data, the only group that prioritizes American Black women are American Black men.
That's it. Yeah, that's it, Doc.
And if you're going to alienate the only group of men that prioritize you,
you're not going to have great results at all. And I keep going back to this social contract, and I'll put this in the private chat. The new terms of the soul, and this is something, and please pick it apart. Please pick it apart. But my thoughts are the new social contract. So what do we get? And it's because we don't get submission, we don't get cooperation, we don't get
contempt.
Yeah, we get contempt. So what do they give us? They give us the absolute minimum, and that breaks down to validation and attention. And what do they get in return? They get protection. But here's the protection that they get. This includes us laying down our lives for any one of them. They get a bad pedicure at the local Asian nail shop. We're supposed to go in there like gangbusters and hit everybody in there with brooms and bricks and like the Navy SEALs, the Negro SEALs, if you will. Like we go in there like the Negro SEALs, right? And provision includes taking care of their children fathered by other men. Okay, that's part of the new contract. This is not something that was as prevalent in the contract that we had pre-1955, but now it's part of the obligation. Okay, and then I also added in the emotional support, which means their exclusion, right, carrying their emotional load to the exclusion of other women from other races. And here's the kicker: certain classes of Black American women of our own race. What do I mean by that? If she's too light-skinned if she's too light-skinned just because she's having a bad day, you're still not supposed to empathize with her. You're not supposed to come to her aid. I find that also very interesting. What are your thoughts on that, Doc?
Well, go into that a little bit more. Give us a scenario with that.
Okay, so I'm gonna adopt what you said, that the emotional load falls under protection. Okay, so you have a situation where if you see a woman, a Black woman, let's pick one. I don't know, somebody who's not sympathetic. Pick a Black woman who's married to a light-skinned Black woman married to a dark-skinned Black man. Let's say somebody that would otherwise be Black if they were married to a white man. Let's say a Jennifer Lopez, right? Let's pretend like she has some Black in there. Now she's married to a dark-skinned Black man. Oh no, she's not one of us. She's a foreigner. So something bad happens to her. So now you're not supposed to sympathize with her. You're not supposed to console her for what she's dealing with. And I'm sure there are better people that have African descent. I don't know if J-Lo actually claims her African descent. I know she's Puerto Rican, but that's kind of what I'm talking about in that context.
Okay. You're saying the brother that's with her, in order to stay in the good graces of the Black community, is not supposed to provide her emotional labor because she's light, or what is that what you're saying? Because
she doesn't
she doesn't represent the idea of the American Black woman.
She does not represent the idea of the Black American woman that needs the most. And that's typically the darker skin, darker complexion sisters. And you know, even amongst the African American women, like I've noticed that they oftentimes will ostracize the lighter, fair-skinned women, especially if they have Eurocentric features, especially if they have that long curly hair. I see what happens with them. They get called all sorts of names. They get vilified, and it goes both ways. But the dominant society does most of the attacking on dark-skinned women. They make them out to be these brutes and these mammy types. It's real touchy. And it would take a Black American woman to explain the dynamic of that, but I've seen it happen just as an outsider looking in.
Well, and there's so many dimensions to how we've seen these kind of things play out, because you can see it in terms of skin color. I've seen it in terms of hair texture,
right?
In terms of body shape. I've seen it in terms of class. I've seen it in terms of nationality, right? And especially if you're talking about international.
Right.
I've seen it in terms of age. Shout out to Jay Jermaine for that support. I've seen it, but all of these different dimensions, these different divisions and dimensions play out in terms of what I hear you saying is the shaming of Black men and the attempt to control the amount of emotional labor men give to approved Black women. And that approved Black women seems to shift. Or whether you're talking about age, weight, hair texture, skin color, eye shape, body weight entirely, nationality. There are all these different dimensions, and who gets approved and who doesn't becomes a huge issue, because what tends to happen is, I think in many ways Black men are viewed kind of like if we were to talk about home ownership and you talked about the equity in your home, the home you own, who gets that equity?
Right.
Who gets to profit off of that Black male? And who should be able to get that and who shouldn't. And there seems to be a great deal of interest in making sure that Black men's resources in terms of that emotional labor, as well as the material, right, is tightly controlled. And when you start to, you don't even have to oppose it. When you just start to question, why should I play out what I'm being pressured to perform? Why don't I determine who I'm going to give that to based on how I feel about them in one respect, but also how they treat me? When you start to raise those questions, you see immediately an intense backlash against Black men who have decided to say, hey, wait a minute, I'm going to decide who I'm going to give my energy to. And the irony is, it could still be a Black woman and you'll still get it if it's not approved of in a very particular way, because there's so many different ways you can cut that cake up.
I mean,
and I may be misunderstanding what you're
saying.
No,
you see, this thing is still, I haven't still wrapped my mind around it yet. I'm still talking to you publicly. This is a conversation that, you know, when you're sitting in the teacher's lounge, or you're sitting in some laboratory somewhere, or in the library or some room, this is like a think tank conversation, because I'm really trying to get a better understanding of it. Here's another thing, since you mentioned that who you are allowed to give your who you're allowed to give your attention to, who you're allowed to carry, whose emotional load you're allowed to get. Think about a very fit, slender woman. Mm-hmm. She could be dark, light, whatever. Mm-hmm. But if you have, and especially if she's young, right? You got an under 25 or under 29-year-old woman who's slender and fit and, you know, well kept. You're going to be looked at. Especially if you're in a room full of women who are obese, especially if she has natural hair, whether she's dark or light. And it's almost like they try to dictate whose emotional load we can carry. Yeah. I just find the whole idea fascinating. Now, again, I'm looking at it on a macro level, because you don't have to go in a room and tell each and every one of those African-American women how to behave when you bring a woman who they don't find acceptable for you as a black man to have. It's almost like on cue. They know how to look at her sideways. They know how to come up with the jokes. Girl, you dressed for the summer. Look at them in there with that young girl. She must be one of them OnlyFans girls or something like that.
But this is how nuanced it can be. Because when you described her, you described my wife.
Oh,
I remember when I we first started to get serious, I introduced her to some female friends that I'd known for a long time. And between, it's about three of them, you know, one was extremely light, one was extremely dark, one was in the middle. A couple of them were larger size, you know, one was really thin. You know, you had all these dimensions, right, among these women. They took one look at the woman I don't think I was engaged yet, but they took one look at her. And they had, now she was dark skinned, she was slender, she had natural hair, and she had a pretty smile.
Okay.
By all intents and purposes, she should have been acceptable. Right. She wasn't, because she was young, she was pretty, and she was fairly thin, and most of all, she had an uplifting disposition. The girl would smile at you at the moment she saw you, even if she didn't know you. I was surprised to find. Appreciate that, brutally honest. Welcome to the Onyx Brotherhood. I was surprised to find that they called her out, and they would make fun of her, and they would tell her, you know, you're not a real sister because that's why. And they would come up with all of these different things. So I'm saying there are so many different dimensions where we see this, but the connecting fiber to all of this is who you give your energy to, and the extent to which you have a tradition in our community, in the gynarchy. What I refer to as the Black Gynarchy family structure, where you're supposed to give your resources only to who's been approved by the network of women that you are owned by.
You know, and I got a scenario for them that might, because a lot of ladies are going to be looking, and they're not going to be here he's talking about. So, ladies, I want you to listen to me, and fellas, you listen to me too. So, your boyfriend says he's sitting in the car, right? He's been there for like 20 minutes talking on the phone. You don't know who he's talking to, right? You know, he likes to talk to his mother, he likes to talk to his sister, whatever. You're cool with that. Now you go knock on the window and say, hey, I need you to go to the store and get some eggs and some honey buns and some diapers. And who are you talking to? Come to find out, he's talking to a friend of his from school.
Okay.
Right? Or better yet, an ex-girlfriend who he's still cool with. Now, he's not providing her any money. He's not providing her any protection. She's apparently just, father has just died, mother's just died, and he's basically bearing that emotional load. How many of you women would find that acceptable? Right? Probably little to none of you would find that acceptable, because you don't want him bearing her emotional load. That's not acceptable. I think that's an example of men bearing an emotional load when it's he's out of bounds. Basically, he's involved. You see what I'm saying with that?
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Yeah, and so that is, or fellas, you wouldn't even dream about your phone rings and come to find out it's your baby mama and she's complaining about her new boyfriend, cheating on her with some other guy, and your girlfriend is right there. Do you think that? How long does that phone call last? How uncomfortable are you talking to your ex-girlfriend who has your child, right? About what her new boyfriend did and broke her heart. You gonna have that conversation with your new girlfriend right there? No, you're not allowed to carry that emotional load, sir. You like, ooh, I'm gonna get back to playing these video games. I'll let you play.
It don't even need to go that far, man. I've been cussed out just because an ex texted me.
Right.
I didn't even know she was texting. She just texted, and I'm getting cussed out like I have some kind of affair going on.
Yeah. So when these ladies say, "Oh, you men are not there for us emotionally," oh yes, we are. And on top of that, we're there for you emotionally, and you don't want us to be there for other women emotionally, unless it's maybe our mamas. But then what happens to men who carries their mother's emotional load too much? What do women, how do they shame you out of talking to you a mama's boy? You always up under her skirt. You need to break that. You need to be a real man. So you don't want us carrying the emotional load of our mothers. It's there, ladies. And that's just on an individual level. And like I said before, you get angry with black men when we start telling you stuff like, baby, you need to lose at least 120 pounds or grow 5 feet because you are heavily overweight. You expect us to hold that. You expect us to not say anything about it. So it's true. Don't try to dismiss this. Don't get mad. We know what's happening. But doctor. Go ahead, doc.
She can tell you that you need to increase your income.
Oh, yeah.
You need to make over 100,000 more than you make. She can tell you that. Or she can tell. Look, I've seen it where on the first meeting, she can tell you, well, when we do get together, my money is my money and your money is our money.
Oh my!
The audacity of that.
Yes, Lord.
I've never seen a man say, well, here's how this is going to go. My penis is mine and for whatever I want to use it for. And, your parts are, strictly for me. That dynamic in it, most men, that's not even a conversation you hear about being commonly had, but the reverse of it is far more acceptable. So I'm trying to get brothers both individually and collectively to actually take stock of the resources that they liberally extend on a regular basis, because we've not been taught to appreciate what we extend. Actually, now I'm not saying don't provide it. I'm not saying don't engage. I'm saying you choose, but take stock. Step back and look at what you actually bring, and just assess. And this is one of the things that in the last few years I've come to value, because we didn't have conversations about sexual marketplace value when I was.
No,
I never heard of the concept. You know what I mean? All I knew was, as a teenager to a young adult, the only time women really paid attention to me is if there was a sexual role I could play in their life. But then when you cross 35, 40, all of a sudden you start getting different kinds of women coming at you with a whole different list of expectations.
Right.
If you're successful in any measure, you're just like, well, what is this? Shout out to the Roger Report. Thanks for having you in here.
Shout out to Roger Report, man. What's happening, brother?
So the dynamic shifts, and that's one of the things, that I never expected, because I still saw myself the same way at 35 that I saw myself at 17, but the social environment changed and what I could provide changed. And so all of a sudden the way women were approaching me changed. And nobody told me why or how. I picked up some elements, but I didn't have the full picture. So we start really looking at sexual marketplace value. I'm trying to tell men, you actually have a number of things that aren't even discussed that should be part of your assessment, your self-assessment. But you're interested in taking this in a more of a macro kind of framework, which is what
I want to, but I think it's important that the men understand on an individual level what they give. Because so let's try this. And you had a young man, Marcus Aurelius, and he gave a great scenario. He talked about a lady friend of his who called, and he said he basically had to sit on the phone and listen to her and cajole her, and that's okay, and I understand. And how does that make you feel? And and I understand. that is so emotionally draining.
Yes, it is.
And you don't even want to, you want to lay down at that point.
Yeah.
You know, you want to lay down and go to sleep after. You don't want to play video games, basketball, football. It's so emotionally draining. Fellas, you know that conversation that you have, and this shout out to all the men who juggle multiple women. I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you deal with those good morning text messages. And, hey, babies. I don't know how you remember all their names and their birthdays. Bro, I'm good with one woman. All these dudes talk about we need multiple wives to save the black community. Bruh, you on your own, bro. The one I got, I'm cool with. Okay, because I got other stuff I'm thinking about. And then I'm like, hey, baby, how you doing? Because I want to keep the cooking happening. You see what I'm saying? I've gotten used to having a woman cooking, and it's nice. And so in exchange for the cooking that I'm getting, and my lady will tell you, I love the cooking. Everything else, hey, you're beautiful, you're young. I like the cooking myself because that's the only thing I can't get when I'm by myself is some good home cooked food. Uncle D is real simple. Feed me. I'm a big man. I like to eat. You cook good. We friends forever. And you got a good personality.
Right.
Funny. Oh hell, y'all, we gonna get married. That's why she got that big rock. But what I'm saying is I don't think men appreciate what they're actually giving. No. It's draining. Having to do. Women have to go to therapy. They like think about the psychiatrists and the psychologists that need their own therapists because they're listening to other people dump that emotional load on them every day.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? And so until you guys recognize what you're actually having to do, it's hard for you to begin to change. It's hard for you to begin to say, hey, as a group now, this is what you're doing because they need to recognize on an individual level what they're doing first.
Right. And see, the other dimension I would add to that is I want to see men actually prioritize themselves, take care of themselves. Look, I got boys that'll tell you about the new car they bought or the new trip they bought, trip they took or whatever, or the new clothes they bought or whatever. Let me tell you, I just bought a walk-in tub.
Yeah.
It just got installed. I ain't used it yet. We just finished installing it today. Right. Do you understand when I get out of this show tonight, I'm about to sleep in that tub tonight. But my point though is that it had never dawned on me when I thought about things that I wanted in the world for years. It was things and I hadn't processed it this way, but it was things that were not only appealing to women, but in a low-key kind of way would benefit women, whether it was a car, a house, or whatever. It was always in service to appealing to women. I never really stepped out and said, you know what, I'm going to do this for me. I want black men to know themselves well enough to say, you know what, I enjoy smoking cigars. I'm actually going to take X amount of time out a week or a month to go to a cigar shop and enjoy a cigar. I want to go, if I like taking a trip, especially to a certain country, and I just enjoy being there. It's not about appealing to other people and making it look good on social media. I want to go because I enjoy it. I want you to do it. If it's a bathtub, I don't care what it is, but I want us to be able to prioritize ourselves enough to actually make that part of the equation, because I don't think we know how to. I really don't.
I don't think so. And we owe it to ourselves. It's that one of those ways you can relax and dump that off. And men take we're not typically allowed to distribute our emotional load to women. You can't go and tell your woman you had a hard day at the job. You can't tell that your boss might fire you. You have to take it all in, which is probably why we die of stress.
Yes.
Probably why we have heart issues and those sort of things. So if you guys don't believe the emotional load is the real thing, go ask your doctor, about internalizing all those emotions, stress, and not letting it out. But the thing is, Doc, and I think now we've laid the foundation for that. We've established what the emotional load on an individual level, on a macro level. Like, what do you see? What do men in general carry as far as the emotional load for women in general? Greater society, subsect. What are your thoughts? You had about a week to think about it. What do you think?
Well, I mean, I think we see it on a lot of different levels, man. I mentioned earlier whether you were talking about welfare, whether you're talking about education. Like, one of the things we've seen in the last 50 years is this prioritization of women going to college. What we've seen in the last year, right? Where we start to see these philanthropic organizations that are developing programs to train Black women. There's been no mention of Black men.
No.
We saw programs designated for helping people during the pandemic, helping small mom and pop businesses advance. They actually developed some for Black women. There was no mention of small entrepreneurial programs for Black men. There was none. I mean, so we provide this on a variety of levels, institutionally, in terms of policy, right? We have so many structures in place that we purely define this materially, but we don't often think about the emotional level that provides for on a societal basis. How comfortable does a woman feel when she knows if she's poor, she can get welfare, if she's middle class, she can get a college education and a white collar a job? You know what I'm saying? Those are resources that are set for her. For Black women, you know, if you lose your job, look, I'll put it to you this way: I've never met a brother that couldn't easily think of the couple of things that would need to happen to send him sleeping under a bridge. Every man that I've ever met and had this conversation with can tell you in 2 steps what can happen that would have him sleeping under a bridge somewhere. We never lose sight of that because there are no networks, there's no safety net in place for Black men. None. So when we talk about this emotional labor and the dimension of it that applies to the society, we see it all the time.
Right.
We just don't process it that way, but we do know ain't nobody, providing any kind of labor for us.
Man, Doc, you hit something there. So, okay, guys. So men have a tax burden that pays for us and the women and children in the society. Women basically pay less taxes than they're worth because the jobs they do really don't provide that sort of tax burden. They don't carry their own tax burden. There's the issue going on in South Korea right now. You got a bunch of florists and whatnot, and they're running out of money over there because these women are basically a burden on the system. So, and if I can, Doc, and I'm gonna say what you said in my way, my terms. Basically, the doctor's saying they tax men, they tax the hell out of us, so that they can afford welfare, EBT cards, what else is stuff? What Section 8 and all this other stuff. So women know if everything goes to hell in a handbasket, they're still going to be all right. So that provides you some provides you some emotional comfort that you know that you'll never be out on the street. Matter of fact, more than likely, nobody will ever let a woman be on the street in a cold storm. If she's a woman, older, younger, somebody's going to pick her up. But the government taxes men so that you don't have to worry about that. Look, that is the emotional load, and it's literally coming out of our pockets. That is, it's literally something you can quantify.
And I want to ask you to include this because you have intimate knowledge of it. Talk about the role that family court plays in emotional labor.
Oh my. Well, women pretty much know when they walk in family court, they have an advantage, and more likely than not, they're going to win, and they're going to pretty much get what they're going to. So they can have a child out of wedlock, knowing that if they got a man who has a few dollars in his pocket, they're going to get that support from him. And on top of that, they're more likely than not going to get their children. So they don't have the issues with having children these days that men have because they get a chance to keep the children. As far as family court, I mean, I would love to be able to walk into court every time I go and know that I'm going to win. It's like having contributed $10,000 or $15,000 to the judge, and all the jury looks like you. The DA or whoever opposing counsel is your golfing buddy. Y'all went to college together. That's how women should feel when they go to family court.
Yes.
You see, and what does that do now on the flip side? How do men feel when they go to family court? A family court that they more than likely paid for with their tax dollars. Think about it. Yeah.
I mean, it's you can tell how biased it is because when you hear about a man actually winning a positive judgment, they're surprised.
Right.
He's surprised, let alone anybody else that hears about it. And you know who's more surprised than anybody? You ever see those videos where it happens? You look at her face.
Oh yeah.
Court. when she lost?
He got he gets possession of the children. That's almost unheard of.
Oh man.
You know? Yeah, it's just or she gets convicted for domestic violence. As violent as, well, I don't want to say that because YouTube is funky, but we know that it's not a one-way street. And in fact, there's some studies that say it's the lovely ladies doing more of it than the men. It's just the women. And so now
they initiate first more often than not. They use weapons more often than not. And I would argue that many go into it with a kind of entitlement because we've not grown up in a culture where we've seen women held accountable by law for physically their physical relations with other people in terms of what they physically do to other folks, particularly men. We've not grown up in a culture where we've seen them collectively held accountable, but we've seen men be collectively held accountable. And now with the advent of Me Too, there's now a push where men are now sexually accountable in a way they've never had to be. And there are arguments on both sides of the line as far as that. But here's the thing. We've never seen women held accountable for their sexual behavior in the same kind of way. So it's interesting to see how these one-sided dynamics play out.
Yeah. I mean, well, Doc, I think the first step in what we're doing is laying this out so men can understand. And I think that's the benefit of social media. You can have a doctor on the East Coast talking to a lawyer down south, both black men, both fathers with the same experiences, comparing notes, not only their life experiences, but also using their education, to kind of hash this out so folks can really understand. This is a conversation that, between you and I that couldn't be public 25 years ago. And so,
man, if I'd have heard this 25 years ago, I might be where you are, man. You figured out the game much earlier than.
Hey, man, I'll be 48 this year, so I'm just now figuring it out. Yeah, so but shout out. Look, Dr. Ron O'Neill's here. Shout out to Dr. Neil.
That's right. What's up, Doc? Good to have you in here, man.
Yeah, man. So what do we do going forward, Doc? I mean, how do we? Because what do we do here? What do we do with this information? How do we package it and give it to men so that they can use it in their lives? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think we have to push, and it will be uncomfortable, but actually push men to not only take stock, but to find value in themselves. And we also now addressing that individually, but also in a collective fashion. Can we actually do the same as a collective? Can black men be a resource to black men?
Okay.
It's a question that has to be asked because, as I said earlier, there's no safety net for us.
Right.
At all. So is there a way that can happen? Can I call Attorney Spurling and get legal advice about a situation? Can he call me and say, I need help with a paper or whatever? I mean, is there a dynamic where, or even it can be even something a little more subtle than that? Can I call you and say, hey man, I'm having some trouble trying to understand what exactly is going on with my relationships. Can you give me some insight from your own experiences? Or does it have to remain some type of competition? The point I'm trying to get to is I want brothers to take stock, actually see the value that they bring to the table, prioritize their own health and well-being, and not just physical health. Because some of us can be in the gym, and that is great. But when you start talking about, other types of health, other types of healing, other types of taking care of ourselves, we look at you blankly because we don't necessarily know how to do that. Can we actually appreciate who we are, what we do, and do so individually and collectively? And I think if we can do that, it changes the political conversation we're having. So, because that's what we've been doing on my channel. We've been doing in different sections of YouTube for the last couple of years. We created the Black Male Political Agenda. Now I'm 47 myself. I'll be 48 this year as well. In my lifetime, I have never seen a political agenda that actually identifies the struggles, issues, and possible solutions for what Black men endure. Never seen it.
I don't think you ever will. I mean, I hate to say it like that, but I don't consider myself part of the manosphere because that's something that other folks invented. That they have a lock on that. I was a married man. I got kids. I'm about to get married again, so I don't fit some of the tenets. but there are some great concepts in there. And one of them has to do with female nature. They're not going to struggle like we struggle, Doc. They're not going to do, if you put women, and I'm a sexist. I'm going to be the chauvinist right now. All right. Tell me I'm lying, though. If women had to deal with the pressure that men have to deal with, they would all be under a bridge. I'm not talking about, oh, I got to get up and I got to be at work at 8:30 and I got to work there till 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock and come home and pick up the kids. No, you have got to jump off of this boat with 100 other men, and there are people shooting at you from the beach. And about 25% of you are going to die before you get to the water. Okay. And then after you finish fighting that war, you got to come home and work in a plant for about 12 hours a day, every day, for the rest of your life. You might get cancer. You might have kids. You got to pay for those kids and the wife. She might divorce you. You might end up living in your car. There's so many things that can happen to you. Or you end up working in a coal mine. You know you're going to get black tar disease, but you still got to do it anyway. If women had to endure the physical trauma and labor, and here's another thing, you got to deal with men for the rest of your life, where there is always a slight chance of violence that can pop off anywhere. From the baseball field to the courtroom to the boardroom. I don't think women can deal with the stress that men can deal with. I don't think they're built for it. And so that if we want to have a society, if we want to have a productive society, we're going to have to shelter women. We're going to have to do it, or otherwise they'll all be under the bridge. Men, we know we're going to end up under the bridge. It keeps a fire under your proverbial, butt, right? And so it's what keeps us going, because there's no bottom there. If you have men who know that there's a safety net, and Doc, I mean, shut me down, please. Tell me you're you're misandrous. Please shut me down. But from what I've noticed, what I see is that women are not going to do it. They would rather roll over and die. Okay? They would rather. They're not going to fight back like men. They're not going to struggle and suffer. When it gets real hard, they're not going to do it. They're going to fall apart. It's not going to happen. That's why women have such a hard time when they go to prison. That's why they have a hard time when they're isolated, when they're alone. That's why you got so many women who are alone or on meds right now, because they're trying to live like men have been living, and it's not working out for them. Tell me I'm wrong. I want to be wrong in that, but I don't think women can handle the stress, and that's why society puts that safety net underneath them.
I'll put it to you this way, because I know you got to go, and I really appreciate you taking the time to be here. But I'll put it to you this way: the fact that we don't even have the prisons built. If we actually, because women get sentenced 65% less for the same crimes as men. If we actually held women to the same standard we hold men, we do not have the physical prisons in place to lock women up. So not only are they not ready for it, society's not ready for it. But look, counselor, I really appreciate you being here. I know you got a list of things to do, man. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. Tell people before you go when they can catch your next show, when you broadcast, and if they haven't been there, how to get to your YouTube channel.
You can just type in Dennis Spurling Unfiltered, and I pop up. I got probably maybe 600 videos up. You can go through the catalog. I try to put a fresh one up every weekday. I've literally dedicated time out of my day to do this YouTube thing as long as I can. My schedule is things happen. I had to drop out of my PhD program and get back to litigating cases, but because of this pandemic that we're in, I have a lot of time. I work from home. I've developed new ways to do it, and instead of just using this computer setup for Zoom work, and cases and whatnot, I'm able to do this broadcast. It's something I kind of stumbled across. But you guys can catch me midday. The brothers call me Uncle D. Other people call me the Blizzard King. They said, if winter is coming, I'm the Blizzard King. I'm ushering it in because, I preach a liberation doctrine to men. You are free. This world belongs to you. You're free to do whatever you want to do. As specifically black men, you've given enough to this country. You've given it enough to people. You've given enough to everybody. You're free now. And I want to see you enjoy your lives. I want you to figure out what it is God wants you to do and go do it. That's my thing. And I wish somebody had told me that long ago. And once you do that, and once you realize you own yourself and no one owns you, if you then decide to come back to America and set up roots, marry a woman, whatever color she may be, black, white, I don't care. I just want you to find peace of mind and happiness. That's my main thing. Because see, here's the thing, Doc. It's important for me to look out for other black men because I got to live next door to them. And what you don't want is an unhappy black man, living next door to you or around you or dealing with your daughter or interacting with his kids, interacting with your kids at school. So it's incumbent upon all of us to try to teach brothers how to work these issues out. But yeah, you can find me at Dennis Spurling Unfiltered. I got it's like a frat house over there sometimes. Sometimes it's like a lion's den. I focus on talking to guys, me and the guys, we got it's a great time over there, and I enjoy it. It's invigorating. We got Crips, Bloods, cops, robbers. We got drug dealers. We got lawyers. We got everybody. Everybody's on my page. Everybody's welcome, and everybody has input. So, you guys are welcome. Come to Dennis Spurling Unfiltered. And that's it, man. They man. Is in the house, baby.